On November 7, Putin and Trump discussed the war over the phone, according to source from the Washington Post. The new US president advised Putin not to escalate the situation and reminded him of the significant US military presence in Europe. So, there you have it. You say Trump isn't trying? Not in 24 hours, of course, but he's already making phone calls. And while the war continues, let's discuss how a new Russian offensive has begun in the Kursk region, how the breakthrough in Sontsovka threatens to collapse the entire defense, and where Ukrainian drones are flying. This is Jan Matveev with a brief overview of the front line over the past week. I'll tell you where the most active battles are taking place, how the position of the sides has changed, and what to expect this week. The Russian army launched its third counteroffensive in the Kursk region. On the 7th, columns advanced to assault Darina, Novoivanovka and Pogrebki. The goal was to cut off the northern part of the Kursk front, reach the Sverdlikova, Lebedevka, Malye line and attempt to encircle the AFU units defending to the north. At the same time, they aimed to approach Sudzha. In Novoivanovka, Ukrainian tanks repelled attacks by Russian infantry. Now, on the 5th day of the offensive, the village is under AFU control. In Darina, the first attacks were also repelled, while the most active fighting took place near Pogrebki. There, the Marine Brigade managed to break through not only to the village, but also to the south. However, they soon became encircled. 14 APCs from the Marine Brigade were hit. There was also other equipment destroyed. Deep State channel published this photo. As you can see, the column advanced south of Pogrebki. However, the Marines were cut off. One of the most optimistic Russian bloggers, Podolyaka, writes, "There has been fighting in this area for a day, and judging by what is happening on the second day, the enemy, and I will repeat, the enemy has accumulated reserves here and had plans to attack, and we just played ahead of the game, is gradually neutralizing the threats posed by the breakthrough of the Marine Brigade column through the village of Pogrebki to the south. Those of our units that were disembarked from armor in several places have taken up circle defense, and no one can get through to them yet. All the villages we allegedly liberated that day are now under almost complete enemy control. As a result, our encircled paratroopers are somewhat constraining the logistic routes of the AFU in the area of fighting, forcing them to exert more effort. But in general, they have localized the threat from our breakthroughs here. Also, on Novoivanovka, all the success was in the first day. Further advanced have bogged down in the enemy defenses. This is his map showing how he sees the situation on the afternoon of November 10. Podolyaka is usually known for bold arrows favoring the Russian army. So if he's painting the situation like this, it may be more complicated than it seems. There is very little visual material so far, which again suggests the offensive is faltering. Let's take a look at a couple of important videos from the Kursk region. It is here that the Russian military is actively using kamikaze drones with fiber optics. This time, an Abrams tank was targeted. The result of the strike is unclear, but did you notice the weather and the condition of the road? The conditions are clearly bad. These routed roads are hindering the attackers, adding another disadvantage for the Russian army. The second video shows a border area near the village of Novy Put. A Ukrainian Bradley is evacuating infantry when it's hit by a rocket and then by mortar fire. However, it managed to leave the shelling zone safely. It may not be a tank, but the defense, including dynamic defense, works quite well. According to various sources, the Russian offensive in the Kursk region is just beginning, and soon North Koreans, among others, will join the fight. We'll see. For now, they are being held on the second line, according to the Ukrainian military. But in the Donetsk region, a large-scale offensive on Kurakhovo continues and the northern flank has become active again. In the Kurakhovo direction, Russian troops are conducting an offensive from these sides, north, east and south. This week, they have moved forward by 3-4 kilometers in all areas, but the most significant breakthrough occurred in the north, in the area of Sontsovka. The offensive advanced along the road from Novodmitrievka and entered the village. Fighting for it is still ongoing, but Russian units have entrenched themselves in Sontsovka and are difficult to dislodge. This map clearly shows how dangerous the loss of Sontsovka is. Over the past days, Russian forces gradually moved through Ilyinka to Bersky, advanced southward near Novoselidovka and Voznesenka. This offensive has given the AFU a chance to retreat. But the breakthrough to Sontsovka is a blow to the rear. As I mentioned in the last video, this was where the AFU could have established a defensive line after retreating from the pocket. Now that possibly is gone. Now they will try to hold Stary Terny and Shevchenko to prevent the highway from Kurakhovo from being cut. Otherwise, the town will fall. I think Beresky will hold out for some time. They will be supplied from the dam near Kurakhovo. But the northern flank is just one problem. The defenders of the city face another challenge: frontal attacks. Taking advantage of superior numbers and the fact that the AFU is fighting from all sides, Russian forces are launching wave after wave of assaults from the east, and they are making progress. Yes, many armored vehicles and infantry have been lost, but important landmarks in settlements and the private sector on the eastern outskirts of Kurakhovo are now occupied. This is about to turn into full-fledged urban fighting. Dalny is now very close to the contact line. Kurakhovo could find itself in a semicircle before the defense along the Sukhy Yal river is even breached. The southern flank of the Kurakhovo section is still some distance from the city's battlefront, but here too the Russian army is advancing across a broad front. The fighting for Trudovoye is ongoing. As shown on the map, the settlements along the Sukhy Yal river are still holding, but Putin's unit may reach them at multiple points as early as this week. Additionally, the advance toward Dalny threatens a blow to the rear. The situation is becoming very difficult. However, the Ukrainian military is in no hurry to retreat west, instead attempting to hold the Russian army at Kurakhovo for as long as possible. In my opinion, this is not the most favorable decision. For the last 2 weeks, they could have prepared defense lines near Constantinople and retreated to them, rather than fighting in a position of inherent disadvantage, as they are now. Of course, it should be noted that the Russian army is paying a heavy price for its advance. Equipment and infantry are being lost to mines, artillery strikes, and drones attacks. But the disparity in forces is too great. Another important area where events unfolded this week is just to the north, opposite the recently captured Selidova. Russian troops advanced toward Yurievka and Petrovka. Given the offensive on Sontsovka and the assault on the village of Zarya that began at the end of the week, there is a risk of another major bulge forming. This entire area is relatively empty, and Ukrainians are focused on defending Pokrovsk. If a bulge forms on the left bank of the Solona River, it could lead to encirclement of Pokrovsk from the flanks. This would pose a significant threat over the next 2 or 3 months unless the AFU can stabilize this defense line. As for the rest of the front, active fighting continues in the Kupiansk section near Belogorovka in Chasov Yar and Toretsk. Here, Russian troops have been able to slightly expand their zone of control, occupying several high-rise buildings. However, a decisive victory is still far off. Putin's units in Toretsk are still lacking strength, and the AFU is resisting stubbornly. In Chasov Yar, there is no change through attacks and constant shelling persist. Both sides are trying to locate enemy positions and attack them with drones, while Russian aviation is also launching missile strikes. The Seversky Bulge is still holding, despite a recent assault by armored columns. Russian forces were unable to advance there. The November 2 attacks, details of which emerged this week, only resulted in heavy losses in equipment and personnel. It's interesting what Putin had to say about the Kupiansk direction.
Сейчас на некоторых направлениях, на Купянском направлении, не знаю, говорили это военные или нет пока, еще да, для меня, значит, там 2 очага блокирования. В одном очаге практически окружение, там войска украинские прижаты к водохранилищу, где-то около 10 тысяч группировка заблокирована. В другом, под Купянском, там около 5 тысяч. В окружении уже находятся. И пытаются навести понтонные переправы для того, чтобы частично эвакуироваться, хотя бы, наша артиллерия их мгновенно уничтожает.
What does force of blocking even mean? There were boilers and recently stocking. Now they are talking about force of blocking. In reality, the Kupiansk bridgehead is still well defended and supplied, especially through the town of Kupiansk itself. This week, Russian troops managed to expand the gray zone to Kolesnikovka, but that's about it. It's worth remembering that the Russian 1st Tank Army is advancing in this section of the front. The situation is certainly not easy for the AFU, but there are no immediately prospects for a rapid encirclement. Rather, they'll continue to be gradually squeezed towards the borders of Kupiansk, forcing them to eventually withdraw behind the Oskol River. The Zaporozhye and Kharkov fronts remain stable. Last week, several Ukrainian drone attacks caught my attention. It began with a strike by light engine aircraft on the military harbor of Kaspiysk. 822 airplanes converted into drones were used. The Ukrainians have attempted similar strikes 2 or 3 times already. Remember the attack on the Alabuga economic zone and the Shaheds plant there. The advantage of this tactic is the range and the power of the warhead. Now, there are planes flying to Kaspiysk, but they didn't achieve significant result. It's still quite difficult to damage a ship with a drone, even with a hit. The question immediately arises: is the Caspian flotilla somehow important to the war? No, it has no strategic impact. The second strike targeted a military base in the Rostov region. Several tents were damaged, but it's unclear if anyone was inside.
Вот он, ночной прилет, нахуй. Нихуя въебаловась, пизда тут просто. Вон дырки, нахуй. Шары какие-то, я хуй знаю. Хуя это железо так пробивает. Человека тут ебать как... Ну, пизда, блядь. Заебись, людей не было просто. Охуеть. Волна ебала такая, готова до нашего лагеря возврастала, прикинь, смотри. Людей недавно увезли вот с этих палаток. Смотри, что творится. Нихуя у нас веселуха сегодня была, пизда ночью. Гасились нахуй по блиндажам, по хуежам, смотри, вот палатки живут.
The third attack was a large-scale kamikaze drone raid fires early in the morning on November 10. This attack affected several regions. One drone was headed toward Moscow, but it was shot down en route. A second group attacked Bryansk, and the third targeted Rostov. In Bryansk, a warehouse with equipment and ammunition was hit. In Rostov, all drones were shot down. It's unclear where exactly they were aiming, but military facilities supporting Putin's war were likely targeted. The most pressing question is the Moscow attack.
Город Броницы. 8 утра, беспилотник на Москву.
There are many military targets around Moscow, but since the spring of 2023 year, the city's defenses have been heavily reinforced. This was clearly demonstrated when drones were shot down one after another. 34 drones in total were destroyed. No military or infrastructure targets were hit. The debris of downed drones fell on residential buildings and cars. The drones flew very low, so they didn't have time to burn up as they fell, which caused fires on the ground. As a result, if we include the attacks in Rostov and Bryansk regions, more than 40 drones were effectively wasted, achieving very little beyond a dubious media effect from the strike on Moscow.
Вот. Прилетел к нам. Фу, бля. Заебались разгонять автомобили.
All of this suggests that long-range drone attacks by the AFU have become more indiscriminate, aiming less for military impact and more for media effect. I would include the attempt strike on Moscow as well as attack in Dagestan and Chechnya. However, if all these drones were focused on military base, airfields and warehouses in Russian border regions, the purely military impact would have been far greater. But Ukrainian commanders have made a different choice. Everyone is expecting a powerful Russian counteroffensive in the Kursk region. Even the New York Times reports a 50,000 strong force, including North Koreans, ready to strike. However, the Russian offensive has already begun and has been ongoing for 5 days since November 7. So far, there have been no visible results and North Korean soldiers have not yet actively participated. But I'm sure they will continue trying, all along the same section of the front near Dar'ina, Lyubimovka, Kremennoye, Pogrebki, Cherkasskaya and Russkaya Porechnoye. Their goal remains the same: to reduce the northern part of the Ukrainian bridgehead and gradually encircle Sudzha. Russian troops have made significant gains in the Kurakhovo section. As I expected, the northern flank of Kurakhovo is gradually being captured. The AFU are retreating, but the real problem is that they have failed to consolidate their position along the Sontsovka line. The breakthrough into the rear poses a significant threat to Kurakhovo from the west. This week, Putin's forces will continue advancing south towards the Sukhi Yal River while pressing the attack on Kurakhovo from the front. And to the north, they will attempt to close the pocket, reach Starye Terny and cut the road from Kurakhovo. If they succeed, the city will likely fail within days. What do you think about this? Write in the comments. Jan Matveyev was with you, thanks for watching, don't forget to like, subscribe and stay tuned for the next update.